All right, folks, I think we'll get started. It's 3:15 here. Thanks for joining us in the afternoon on day 2, 3, or 4 of your Vegas journey, depending on when you got here. My name is Rishi Vesh. I run product management for RightScale. I have with me Brian Adler. He's one of our chief architects in our services team, and I have one of our senior product managers, Ryan O'Leary. We're going to talk about AWS, VMware, and hybrid clouds, show you a little bit about how to architect them and then manage them. I'll be talking for the first 15 minutes or so, giving you folks a little bit of a market perspective on kind of what we see happening in our ecosystem. I'll also go through some considerations for hybrid. I'll give you about 5 really interesting use cases that we see our customers doing in a hybrid cloud environment. I'll give you about 4 steps that almost everyone has to go through in order to achieve this hybrid cloud environment and sort of start deriving value from it. Brian will come in and then give you a little more of an architectural deep dive in terms of what are the architectures that work, what are some pros and cons with the various choices you have. And then finally, we will end it with a demo where we'll actually show you a real live hybrid environment between AWS and VMware and some of the capabilities that you can leverage in that environment. So first, just a brief introduction to RightScale. We've actually been a pioneer in this cloud management space ever since Amazon EC2 was born. So we've been in business since 2006. Officially, 2007 is when we launched our product. And over that course of time, we've provisioned about 7 million servers in the cloud for our various customers. And we do this across multiple cloud environments. So both public clouds, Amazon obviously being the biggest one, but also private environments or on-premise environments that might have OpenStack or CloudStack, as well as just plain old vanilla VMware environments too. So we span that sort of gamut of different things that you could have in your on-premise environment. And more recently, we've expanded into a couple of areas that we consider really important for enterprises delivering IT to their organizations. One of them is getting a handle on costs in cloud. So we actually have an area of the product that's dedicated to helping you plan and optimize your costs in this cloud environment. And then we've also added now a capability for you as IT teams to deliver cloud services to your end users, whether they're groups of developers, whether they may be groups of QA people, or even business divisions that just want to do a quick provision of an end-to-end application service. We do this by orchestrating across all of those different cloud environments, and that's the product that we offer as RightScale. It's a SaaS offering. You can consume it from the web. So in addition to having a product offering, we also have a really robust services offering. Like I mentioned, Brian is one of the heads in that team. And soup to nuts, whether you're looking at planning your cloud journey, you just want some help and advice, which application should I move where? Maybe you want some architectural advice, and how should I architect for HA in the cloud? Maybe you actually want us to help you build your environment out too. We'll do that as well. And we also do managed services. So let's say you want us to do soup to nuts, everything. You just get the service up and running and even manage it for me. We'll do that for you as well. So kind of a full services product as well as a services shop. Now, a little bit of market insight here. Over the last 3 years, we've been running this survey. We call it State of the Cloud Survey. And we poll our customers as well as our prospects in terms of what are they doing in cloud. So it's folks like yourself that respond to this survey. You'll see most of them tend to be IT ops people, or they tend to be developers using the cloud. So I think it's pretty relevant to the folks in this room. And what we find is, and especially when you look at enterprises, it is a multi-cloud strategy that's dominating. So we're finding that about 75% of our customers and prospects are using multi-cloud. And specifically in multi-cloud, about half of that overall customer base is using a hybrid environment. And by hybrid, we mean one end on-premise and one end up in the cloud. So that's really interesting. And then we want to see what are the cloud services they're using in these various environments. Well, this one shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody at this conference. In the public cloud environment, Amazon definitely dominates. Whether it's people planning to use it, experimenting, or actually running servers in the cloud, I think Amazon is definitely on top. But then we also dug into the private environment a bit, and there we found that it was VMware's vCenter product, just plain old vSphere, which actually dominates in the private on-premise environment. So that gives you a flavor for what actually exists when we say hybrid. And now we'll dig into some considerations in this hybrid environment, and we'll start by 5 of the use cases that we see in our customer base. So if you folks attended Werner's sort of keynote this morning, he talked about dev test. I would say bar none, dev test happens to be the most popular workload in this environment. And it's dev test versus staging and production. So using a different environment for developing and testing, using a different environment for staging. Certainly the most common deployment pattern is to use the cloud for your development and testing. Two reasons. One, the development workload is very transient. You get to experiment extremely quickly. You can just fire up a server very, very quickly. And then the testing environment, which is one that sometimes gets ignored, the test environment actually allows you to run tests at a scale which you would just not be able to do in your own on-premise environment. So dev test certainly dominates there. We also have customers that do exactly the opposite. So they happen to have a production environment on Amazon. They happen to have a virtual environment on-premise. As an example of a customer in Canada, actually. They sunset some applications in their virtual environment, so they had spare capacity there. And then they started spinning up new development workloads in their on-premise environment that were pretty much equivalent to what they were doing in production. So I'd say that life cycle is one of those key use cases. One other dimension of that life cycle is not just the development and testing of an individual application, but it's the overall life cycle of the app over the course of time. An example here would be probably a digital property would be a great example. In the beginning, when you launch a digital property, maybe it's a mobile app, you have no idea how successful it's going to be. Cloud is a public cloud like Amazon is a great place to place that kind of a workload. But over the course of time, this workload might mature, it might start to taper off, and you may achieve a very steady state. And at that point, we find customers that have on-premise environments shift this workload into their on-premise environment and spin up their next digital property maybe in the cloud. So I'd say that's another really popular use case in this hybrid environment that we see. The next one I'll describe, and I won't go into all of them in detail. I think some of them, Brian actually has some really nice architecture pictures later on, so I'll let him dig into those. But I do want to poke on one that has a lot of business relevance, and that's called best venue. So if you happen to be a geographically distributed company and you operate across several different countries, we have one such example of a customer in the education business. Their job is to actually set up curriculums for schools and colleges all over the world. And for them, best venue of cloud, actually, there's many factors they consider there. One of them is cost. How expensive is it for me to offer my service in a given geography? It could just be the availability of a given cloud exactly where they need that service provided to. If Amazon happens to be there, they spin it up on Amazon. But if they need to do this in a private data center or an on-premise data center, they're able to do it on VMware. And then they're able to reach geographies that they wouldn't otherwise be able to reach simply because they figured out how to deploy workloads in this hybrid environment. So it really has enabled them to reach kind of geographically where they might not have been able to get to on their own. So the other use cases, I'll mention them really quickly. Disaster recovery is one where we see people doing kind of production in an on-premise environment, maybe a disaster recovery in a remote cloud. So that would be hybrid. Brian's got a good slide on that. Split tier is actually taking an instance of an application and running different tiers in different clouds, just depending on what profiles you want for different tiers of the application. And then Cloudbursting is actually taking an instance of an application that's normally running in one data center, but only on demand, bursting it out kind of into the cloud. Both really interesting use cases technically, but tend to be a little less common because they need a little more heavy lifting before you can set them up. So these are 5 good use cases for cloud. Just want to talk about 4 steps that you need to go through before you can sort of create this hybrid environment for yourselves. The first step is to take this on-premise world of yours and make it look like a cloud. And the approach here is to take, so let's say you've got your vCenter environment on-premise. You can apply kind of a cloud orchestration layer on top of it and make it look like a cloud. What the orchestration layer does is it'll give you the capability of zones and tenants and instance types that would not normally exist in VMware vCenter on their own. Now, you can use things like OpenStack and CloudStack to do this, and we have customers that use both of those technologies. That tends to involve a lot of work. Those are not easy things to get set up. We actually have a little virtual appliance that you can plug into VMware, and within 30 minutes, and we'll show you what that looks like too, you can set up these zones and tenants, kind of map them to your VMware environment, and at least make it look like a cloud so you can start getting some of the benefits of this hybrid environment and make it behave much more like a cloud would. So once you've got your on-premise environment kind of cloudified, and you've got your cloud environment which is already ready to go, at that point you need to have your workload be portable across these environments. If you really want to get the benefit of these 2 environments, you have to be able to say, I can do my development here and my testing here and my production here, and not worry about the fact that these environments are different, at least from a configuration point of view. We find 2 broad approaches to doing this. One is what we call the infrastructure as code approach. This has been around for quite a while now. There you take your application, you divide it up into sort of an operating system image layer, and then a configuration layer on top of it that installs software. And so operating systems could be your favorite flavor of Linux. Maybe it's a Windows version that you use. And then you would use configuration management tools, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack, or even PowerShell and scripts. If you just need to script this, you can script it to behave in a certain way too. So this would be treating your infrastructure as code. We also have seen a lot of customers now, very, very popular, trying this container approach. So instead of breaking up your application to images and config scripts, you break it up into containers that you can then port across both these cloud environments. As RightScale, we support both these approaches. We have a pretty flexible, we call this thing a cloud application template. It kind of abstracts all of your resources across the different clouds that you have, provides you with constructs for network compute and storage. That's the basics for provisioning an IaaS type of service. It also has abstractions for images and applications. If folks here already happen to be using CloudFormations to provision their Amazon workloads, those can be plugged in as well. But in addition, we find that sometimes it's not just about network compute storage and some of these services. You might also need to call into PaaS services. Maybe you're using RDS as a database. Maybe you're just using your own internal web service that you must orchestrate during the course of deploying an application. So that end-to-end sort of lifecycle is what this cloud application template provides you with. And I'll just mention one other point here. It isn't just about the provision and deprovision cycle. I think a lot of folks think, hey, once we've got that licked, that's kind of it. But there's also the operational aspect of that cloud application. So what are the things that people can do when it's up and running? You want them to be able to do that automatically too. So we have that abstraction built into this template too. So really flexible, works across this hybrid environment and kind of gives you that one source of truth for what makes up your application. I'd say the third thing you've got to do. So now you've got your environments looking the same. You've got your workloads portable. Now you need a single pane of glass where you can go in and actually look at both these environments. So you don't want to be going to different consoles for managing your different cloud footprints, especially when they're geographically spread out or they may be in different data centers. There's two dimensions to single pane of glass. The one depicted here is a single pane of glass for your end users. So if you're an IT team delivering services to your end users, you just want them to come to one portal and click go. And then you as an IT team have taken care of where that service should get provisioned. The flip side to that would be when you come in and try to do troubleshooting, or you want to look at the infrastructure at one level deeper, you want an operations view of the same console. So we have that type of view as well. So single pane of glass, I'd say, would be the third thing that you've got to do. And the last thing is, this is going to cost you money. So you do want to manage that financial aspect of cost as well. What I've shown here is, if you were to make a decision between should I go cloud or should I go on-premise, the red line would probably represent your capital expenditure in the on-premise environment that you may amortize over a span of time. And it's very likely that you may not even know where you want to start with for a given workload in your public cloud. That's what those dotted lines there at the bottom depict. But what you should do when you think through this is try to understand what your peaks could be. Model your peaks into that too. Maybe you have some seasonality in there. If you're a retailer, for example, this is probably the busiest time of the year for you. So you might want to budget that into your capital, as you're comparing it with your OpEx expenditure on cloud too. I'll probably end this section. I've left for you folks, in the slide deck, which we'll make available later if you want, just some more questions to ask about cost. But the one I want to leave you with thinking about is a lot of times you get asked, well, if I'm actually going to run a server in the cloud for like 3 years for this kind of a workload, isn't it just cheaper for me to buy something and plug it into my data center? I mean, like dollars and cents looks kind of cheaper. But I think what you miss out on if you go down that path is you miss out on the agility that cloud brings you. And the moment you've bought a piece of hardware, you've kind of locked yourself into a given instance size. And one of the cool aspects about doing this in the cloud is you can vary that instance size when the cloud vendor, like Amazon especially, adds a new instance type. So Amazon just added a new instance, or will add one very, very shortly. If you had an on-premise environment, you would have to acquire that hardware, kind of get it in, provision it before you can start using it. And if you stick with the cloud, you get that added advantage of agility and being able to do stuff that you normally would not be able to do. So I'll leave you with that thought and hand you over to Brian Adler to kind of walk you through some architectural details.
Cool. Thank you, Rishi. And as Rishi mentioned, I'm in the services aspect of RightScale. You can tell I don't have a sport coat, so I'm not in product management. So. But so with that in mind, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about when we go and talk to our enterprise customers about hybrid, what are the things that what are the concerns that they bring to the table? How do we talk to them about how they can do this, right? The first thing that I hear when I go in and talk to the enterprises that are looking at setting up some sort of hybrid environment between VMware and AWS is, what about the stuff I have already? I've got hundreds of applications in my portfolio. Some of them are years and years old. I don't even know what's in that thing at this point, right? And what should I do with those? So RightScale itself is not a consulting company, but out of necessity, we've sort of born a consulting wing, if you will. And so part of my job is to go on site to these enterprise customers and discuss with them, hey, let's take a look at what you guys have and try to find that low-hanging fruit. Your CIO or CTO has said, hey, we've got to get ourselves into the cloud. We've already got this VMware footprint. That's probably never going to go away entirely, but let's go ahead and try to leverage the public cloud where we can. Help me get started, right? We've got to get started. So we'll go ahead and we'll take and evaluate these applications across two main axes. One is on the y-axis there is the business impact. That's sort of how critical is this particular application to your business, right? Is it, business critical, or is it less important, that kind of thing? Where is it on that scale? And that's generally a value that we get from the customer. That's not something we can ascertain. That's something you guys need to tell us. On the technical fit, that's where we can provide a lot more value. And that's sort of technical fit for the cloud. How well architected is this application as it stands right now for cloud portability, if you will, right? So it falls into this, classic magic quadrant. Everything's a magic quadrant these days, right? Up and to the right is good, low and to the left, not quite so good. So we try to find some of these quick wins, right? These things that are of important from the business standpoint. They are business critical. And hey, they're pretty technically close to a good fit for the cloud. They're not going to need a lot of refactoring or reworking in order to get them into the cloud. So those are those quick wins, or the low-hanging fruit that we try to look for, right? And just to kind of finish off the rest of the thing as well, the lower right is the what we call hold off. Those things are probably a good technical fit. We can move them over, but they're just not that critical from a business standpoint. So the business folks have said, you know what, let's not put the time and resources into those right now. To the upper left, you have what we call refactor. These are things that are business critical, and it probably would make sense to make them portable and get them into an environment where they could run in either VMware or in AWS, but they're not a good technical fit, so we're going to have to spend some time refactoring these applications. And in the low left, you see the ones we call don't migrate. Those are the ones that they're not a good technical fit. It would take a lot of work and a lot of refactoring to move them. And they're just not that critical from a business standpoint. They can stay where they are. It's worked there for years. There's no point in poking that bear, and let's just leave it alone. So these applications usually, when we evaluate these portfolios, like I said, oftentimes there's hundreds in these portfolios. We'll usually see a smattering of the quadrants are hit here, and we usually go look for those quick wins as far as the first initial foray into moving things in the cloud. Now, how do we do that, right? And this is what we do is we do application scoring. And what I've shown here, this is one slide of maybe like 15 or 20 that we do in a different presentation on just this topic. So I've tried to boil it down to give a representative sample. This is just a technical considerations. There's a whole slew of business ones as well that I'm not going to address. And I'll just kind of highlight each of these to give you a flavor for the type of thing we're talking about. In the basics category, the OS availability. Some of the customers that I've talked to have legacy applications that are running in HPUX, right? AWS and none of the cloud vendors, for that matter, have an HPUX image. So, all right, that's a no-brainer. We're not going to do that, or it's going to involve some heavy refactoring, right? Tenancy, maybe from a compliance standpoint. They're like, our VMs cannot run on a physical host that is hosting anybody else's VMs, right? Now, with dedicated instances in AWS, that's possible. It may not be possible in other environments. From a networking standpoint, multicast. Some legacy applications require multicast, typically for clustering, things like Oracle RAC and JBoss and stuff like that. Multicast is not available in AWS or any of the public clouds for that matter. You can kind of do it using an overlay network in the VPC, but it's cumbersome and doesn't scale that well and those kinds of things. So again, it's not a you can't do it. It's just that, hey, this might be a consideration to move along and look for another application. Static and virtual IP there at the bottom. Folks that are familiar with the classic VIP concept, where you have two servers that share one public IP and they're doing a heartbeat, and there's a sub-second failover if you notice that the other server is down. Well, that's not really possible, right? You can use ENIs and EIPs, for those who are familiar with that, but that takes several seconds, right? A, you have to notice it. B, you have to make the API call. It takes a little while for stuff to move over. Maybe that's fine for the SLA of your application. Maybe it's not. Again, these aren't yes or no's, but there's a lot of gray areas, and you just kind of add it up and see which ones are more white and more black, if you will. On the data and storage side, what kind of storage configurations are available from the cloud provider, and what are your file system needs? Do you need a high-performance shared file system, right? Maybe you have options there, maybe you don't. Master database down the bottom. Any environment that's subject to network partitioning, right? it's real hard to set up a master-master database. So you might want to take a look at how your network is configured and those types of things. And is this a good fit, or should I keep looking for a different application? In the other category, bandwidth, you're never going to get the number of packets in and out of a virtual NIC that you are out of a physical NIC, right? There's two network stacks that are being traversed, the hypervisor's in the way, it's just not going to happen. Maybe that doesn't matter for your app, maybe it does. Again, it's not a cut and dried yes, no, but just another thing to think about. Data movement, right? Data has mass. Data has mass. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money sometimes to move it. We have customers that have terabytes, petabytes of data that they're thinking about moving in and doing elastic map reduce jobs, but they're like, man, how do I get this 16 petabytes of data over? And does it make sense, right? Again, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Just the things to keep in mind as you move forward. Okay, so after we've gone through this application scoring, I'm going to show you the Magic Quadrant thing again. Like I said, they kind of fall out into these different quadrants. And what we try to talk to our customers about is, okay, let's try to group these and try to make sense of how we want to attack this. And in the green, you see the ones that are make portable. And that's kind of in line with what Rishi was talking about. Is, hey, some of these applications, if they're a good technical fit and if they're important from a business standpoint, maybe it makes sense to make them portable so we can launch them in our VMware environment or our AWS environment for whatever reasons, right? Maybe there's business reasons, technical reasons, or you just want to have a fallback plan if your VMware environment takes a dump or something like that, right? So look at the ones that you can go ahead and make portable. You see the gray one there, the upper left, the migrate once. Okay, this one's super important from a business standpoint, but man, it's just not a good technical fit. So we're going to have to do a lot of refactoring. So maybe this one is important enough that we should bite the bullet and go ahead and move it over. And then the ones you see grouped down there at the bottom, maybe we want to manage those natively. From a business standpoint, they're not that critical. So we can go ahead and using the single pane of glass and the cloudifying your virtual environment that Rishi talked about, I think, in step one, maybe those make sense to go ahead and put in that category. So again, the answer is always it depends, right? It depends where your apps fall out in here, what your pain threshold is, what your cost threshold is, right? But everybody goes through this. So if you guys are thinking this and struggling with this, you're not alone. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about how we do the evaluation and pick and choose which applications may or may not make sense, we'll take a look at some hybrid architectures that some of our customers have implemented. I'm going to talk about 3 of the 5 that Rishi mentioned. And the interesting thing is, like he said, dev and test, far and away the most common one that we hear. It's low-hanging fruit. It's easy. That one, so we won't talk about a whole lot about that one. The one I do want to talk about first is disaster recovery. This is probably one of the most common requested implementations that we have. And with the exception of dev and test, it's the most common that actually does get implemented. It's not the most common one requested, which we'll look at in just a second. But it is the most common one that folks do implement. Anybody here familiar with AWS uses the term pilot light? If you're familiar when they talk about pilot light, this is essentially that right here, what we call warm DR. The concepts are the same. Your primary environment, i.e. maybe your VMware environment, right? You've got your full technology stack. You've got your load balancers, your application servers, your master-slave database, everything's humming along, right? In your disaster recovery environment, right? Probably AWS for a lot of our customers is how they implement this. The reason it's a warm DR or pilot light, the only thing that's burning, or if you will, and chewing up any cycles and any cache for that matter, is you're replicating real time to that slave database. You're trying to keep your data as consistent as you can with your master. All your other servers are in this non-operational state, ready to be launched at a moment's notice, or rehydrated, which is a new word I learned while I was here, so that's cool. So you want to rehydrate these things, right? And doing that however you want to do that, right? Be that with RightScale, or Chef, or Puppet, or Ansible, or Salt, or whatever your flavor is, right? Point there is that you have the ability to, in 4 o'clock in the morning when bad stuff happens, hit one button and all these things fire up, right? Once all these servers have fired up, you promoted your slave to your master database, you waited for the interconnects to work, everybody's found each other, you go ahead and you flip the DNS and you point it from your primary to your DR, you're back up and running, right? The RPO, your recovery point objective here, in theory should be 0 or very close to it. If your replication is working as it should, you should be darn close to 0 from an RPO standpoint. From an RTO standpoint, recovery time objective, it depends, right? I mean, it depends how long it takes, you to get out of bed at 4 in the morning and do your promotion and how long it takes your servers to rehydrate and all that other stuff. But we've had customers that have tested this scenario in a Linux world. Windows servers, as we all know, take a little longer to boot up. So caveat that in a Windows world, and have done this entire thing with a fairly large environment in less than an hour. So you're not talking days, you're not even talking hours. They did it in 47 minutes in the tests that I observed for them. So. And it doesn't cost that much, right? You're really only chewing up resources for that slave database and the storage associated with it, right? So this is kind of one of those good bang for the bucks from an implementation standpoint. So like I said, probably other than dev and test, probably the most common one that we see our customers implement. The next one, the most common requested, but the least commonly implemented, and we'll talk about why, is cloudbursting. And Rishi touched on this a little bit, but the concept here is in your environment, i.e. maybe on the left here, your VMware environment, you've got your full technology stack, right? And you've got your load balancers, your app servers, your databases. You've got constraints on how much resources you have, right? You only have so many physical nodes and you can only run so many VMs. What if you have one of those good problems to have where I need more app servers? Something good is happening, I'm having an event, a lot of traffic's being driven to my site or whatever it may be. Hey, why don't I take advantage of the theoretically infinite resources that the public cloud provides to me, AWS provides to me, and let me leverage those. On paper, it makes absolute sense, and does it work? Yes, it does work. But ignore the little direct connect there, right? I should have had 2 slides, one without and one with. But imagine that's not there, okay? And we'll talk about that in a second. But if that's not there, you're going from your private environment to your public environment, and you're most likely egressing out into the public internet, right? And as such, there be dragons, right? You got to worry about securing your packets. People are going to be looking at your packets, maybe. You got to worry about the latency from your packets getting from A to B. You have to worry about the cost. You're egressing out of your environment, and then you're ingressing probably for free into AWS, but when you come back to your load balancer or come back to your database, you're egressing out of AWS. So there's a cost associated with that as well. And like I said, from a latency standpoint, maybe your end users that are hitting load balancers that then hit the app servers in your private environment might have a very different end user experience than the folks that have to deal with the latency as it goes out to AWS and back, right? Again, TCP does a great job of routing packets to where it needs to be, but you have no idea how many hops, no how long it's going to take, or no idea what order they're going to get there, right? So it'll happen, but it might not happen in a time that's acceptable to your end users. So that's where Direct Connect comes in. And how many folks here are familiar with Direct Connect and what it means? I don't want to talk about, okay. The short version basically is that, it's a dedicated link between your stuff and AWS's stuff, right? And basically what it boils down to. And what that eliminates is the need to egress onto the public internet. You have that dedicated link, no public internet traversal, and therefore latency is greatly reduced. The bandwidth, you can purchase up to a 10 gigabit. It's 1 gigabit or 10 gigabit, or you can get it from partners that can do it in like 15 megabit slices or something. I mean, you can get pretty much anything you want. Private IP spaces, security is not as much of an issue. And cost, yes, you do have to pay for the switch and all that, but data egress out of AWS is much cheaper than the public egress because you're not using their public internet routers and all that kind of stuff. So there is a point where it may actually break even or even be cheaper to be able to use it in AWS Direct Connect. So we've had customers that have done this exact scenario and have used their on-premise, actually it was hosted, but let's call it on-premise, hosted environment for their main workloads, and have leveraged AWS Direct Connect and burst it out into, and it was an AWS US East and the Ashburn data centers in order to take advantage of AWS for the cloud bursting. So like I said, a lot of folks ask about this, not a lot of folks do it because not a lot of folks, at least when we've talked to them, have had Direct Connect. Direct Connect's becoming more and more common across the enterprises, so I think we'll start to see this uptake quite a bit more. The next and last one is split tier. And I apologize on this diagram, it probably should be drawn a little bit different. You should probably see the load balancers should be over on the right as well. So load balancers, imagine load balancers and app servers both over in AWS. So the concept here is that your stateless stuff, your load balancers, your application servers, your dynamic stuff, transient stuff that you don't care if one dies because you can launch another one. Let's put that out in the public cloud where it belongs, right? The reason that you may have this master database or your database in general on your on-premise, the most common reason we see this is that database configurations that aren't currently supported in the cloud. Most common one that you guys might be familiar with is Oracle RAC, right? You can't currently run Oracle RAC in AWS public cloud for a myriad of reasons, right? But if your application absolutely requires it, okay, well maybe you guys are in a CoreSite or Equinix or whatever it may be facility that has Direct Connect capabilities to AWS, or you can leverage a partner to get you that. You can run your database on premises, maybe even on physical hardware if you want to put screaming fast drives on it or wherever it may be. Put your database on premise and leverage the public cloud for all your other stuff and leverage that Direct Connect link to give you that fast access to it. So it allows customers to implement stuff on premise that they couldn't do in the cloud and still leverage the benefits of the public cloud. Okay, so those are sort of the three of the five that Rishi talked about. The others, he talked a little bit about best venue and then also about dev and test. Obviously, not a whole lot to show. Dev and test is boring to show, but you kind of know the concept there as well. So now that we've talked about these hybrid architectures, you heard me mention several times about security, and I just want to touch on that again. When we go and talk to these enterprise customers and they're giving us their feedback, they're saying, hey, my security guys have said we can't use the public cloud because it's not secure. All right, we hear that all the time, and that was a lot of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that have been around for many years. Not true, right? The public cloud, AWS in particular, has done a great job of enabling secure workloads to be certified, if you will, in the public cloud. There's new and existing capabilities like Cloud HSM, the hardware security module, the key management service, which Andy Jassy announced on Tuesday, and there's a talk on it tomorrow morning, I believe. So if you're interested, I suggest you jump in on that. I'm going to try to be there as well. Simple storage service, so S3 with encryption in flight and at rest. In flight, obviously using SSL or whatever. At rest, they've had forever. Elastic Block Store. In the last 12 months, they've introduced encryption at rest for EBS as well. And then there's identity access management and the granular permissions that you get with IAM. Right? There's a couple talks here about that as well, which is very interesting. You can really lock down who can do what to the resources within your environment. And then there's third-party tools from AWS partners, which are down in the expo right now, that do key management, data encryption, monitoring, alerting, all that kind of stuff. So the point being is that security is oftentimes a concern, as it should be, but usually those concerns can be alleviated. And this last page, I just want to say, this is a screenshot that I grabbed from the AWS compliance site, which is now different because Andy Jassy mentioned they're now ISO 9001 compliant as well, so this should be updated in our slide deck too. But the point here is that we have customers that are running PCI compliant and applications that have PII, personally identifiable information as well, in AWS under RightScale management, and we have some that are on the way to doing HIPAA in the cloud as well. So point being here is that security can generally be alleviated. AWS has a whole section on security. AWS, I think it's aws.amazon.com/security, bunch of white papers for folks that have concerns about that as well. So with that, I think it's time to hand it over to Ryan for a demo on how we do all this stuff.
You may have to be wearing a jacket, my shirt's untucked, so I'm not sure where that puts me exactly. Switch this over and hope the Wi-Fi is working. So we've talked to you about hybrid and some things that you can do in hybrid cloud and some considerations and things. I want to show you some of the experience that you get when you use RightScale to implement hybrid cloud. So I'm going to do that by looking at it from a user perspective, and we'll look at how different kinds of users in your organization experience hybrid cloud using the RightScale platform. So the first one I want to look at is end users. So how can end users benefit from hybrid cloud? Werner Vogel's mentioned this morning that one of the benefits of cloud is dev test because you can move much faster, right? So what we're seeing here is our self-service product, and this is the catalog. So from a developer perspective, I can go to a catalog and find an application that I want. From a push of a button, I can launch infrastructure. And I want to give you an example of how easy it is to do that. Here's a quick demo of when I launch something. Here are some options I get as a developer. What placement do I want? Do I want cost optimized or do I want high performance? Now from a developer perspective, I just need a machine to develop on. I don't need to know the details necessarily about where that's being placed or what VPCs and things. I just need to know, is it cost optimized or performance? What do I need for what I'm trying to do? So in this case, we'll pick cost optimized. We can pick an operating system. And then in an effort to help development teams save money, we also have a notion of scheduling built into this. So if I'm just launching a dev instance for some reason, I don't need that thing to run 24/7. I don't work 24/7. So I might just pick that I want to limit this workload to business hours. And I can pick an end date. So I need a development environment for a couple of weeks. So I can pick an end date. And now this environment's only going to last for that long. It's only going to run during the business hours that I've specified. And I launch this environment. And now I've got an environment up and running. From a developer perspective, I've got the information that I need on this screen to access that environment. I can SSH in or do whatever I need to do. It depends on the environment, on what information you might need to start working on code. From a developer perspective, I can now start writing software. I don't have to go to the cloud and figure out all the different options I want. I mean, one of the great things about cloud is there are so many options. That's also one of the drawbacks. If you don't need all that information, here you just get a one-click launch and now you're up and running. So that's all great. That's what the end user saw. So what does another user see in terms of hybrid cloud? So let's take a look at what an admin might see. So this screen's a lot smaller than I thought it was going to be. This is what an admin sees. So we have the two servers that are now booting. From an admin perspective, I see a ton more information about what's going on in this deployment. Remember that end user just saw that it was running and had an IP address. From an admin perspective, I see every piece of detail about this environment. What images am I using? What cloud is it on? What VPC is it in? What IP addresses? I can look at monitoring data for the servers. I can set up alerts on the servers. I can look at audit entries to see what's going on these servers, what has been done. So from an admin perspective, this is what low cost meant for us. You can notice the cloud here is VMware vSphere. If we would have picked high performance, the cloud would have been AWS. Again, the end user in this particular use case didn't need to know that. They just needed the instance running. Obviously, in some cases, you would need to know that. Another thing that you get with hybrid cloud from an admin perspective is our account overview screen. So this is that screen here. And from an admin perspective, again, what I get is one view of everything that's going on across all of my accounts, no matter which cloud they're in. Whether they're in AWS or VMware, I can see, for example, in this graph here, I'm looking at my instances that are running in each cloud. And you see in this hover over here that I have AWS and VMware represented in this graph and in this entire page. So from an admin perspective, when I look at hybrid cloud, I have views like this that give me a single view, a single pane of glass, one of those steps Rishi talked about, that I can manage my hybrid cloud from one perspective. Other things you can do on this page, you have storage, you have security concerns. Here I can see alerts on servers that are happening, again, across those different environments. And from here, I can directly take action on those. So I might want to select one of these alerts and figure out what's going on so that I can take action on that and fix it. So here, for example, there's the alert that's firing. I can see that my backup hasn't been taken for too long, and that caused an alert to fire, and now I can go take remedial action if I need to. But it's not just admins and end users of cloud. There are other people that don't necessarily use cloud a lot, but they have an interest in cloud. Think kind of the management types or finance types, and that's where our cloud analytics product comes in line. So here we see our cloud analytics product. This gives me a view, again, across all those different environments. In a hybrid environment, VMware, AWS, any other cloud that you're using, you get that view here of what's going on in those different environments over time. You can slice and dice this in any way that's interesting to you. You can look for patterns and trends. You can set up budget alerts and look at who's spending what where. And it's really easy to drill down. So if I see here that I can see cloud vendors by cost, and I can see what's going on in each of my cloud vendors, we can select Amazon here and just apply that filter to this. And now this page is going to be redrawn with just what's going on in AWS for this particular set of accounts that I've enabled here. So for those people in your organization who don't necessarily use cloud, but they're responsible in some way for the use of or for the management of cloud, this view of analytics gives you a way to really drill down and figure out what's going on, again, across all those different environments in one view. And again, in the spirit of that single pane of glass, you can set up scheduled reports. You can set up alerts for budget across those different clouds or in single clouds. You can export this data out, and it's all going to be one consolidated view no matter which cloud you're using. So that's kind of the different areas of the product that help you with hybrid cloud with RightScale, and obviously there's a lot more. You can see a lot more menu options and things in each of these pages. We don't have time to go through all those, but feel free to stop by the booth. I'm sure some of you were kind of wondering, well, how'd that happen? Like you see VMware and AWS here together, and Rishi mentioned our cloud appliance. So I want to give you a little bit of insight into kind of what's happening behind the scenes and how it's kind of configured from that admin perspective. So the first part of that is to make VMware look and behave like a cloud. So this is our cloud appliance for vSphere. Now this is an appliance that you install in your vSphere environment that cloudifies it. So we see here the notion of instance types. So obviously VMware doesn't have instance types, but this appliance lets you build instance types on top of that VMware environment. So you can create instance types based on common instance types that you use or instance types that are common to what the clouds you use. You can also discover instance types. So we'll look here at what's running in your VMware environment, what types of combinations you have here. You can create instance types from things that are currently running. And same thing for volumes. So again, you want volumes that look and behave like volumes look and behave in public cloud or wherever you're using cloud, and this lets you do that. So now when you go to the tool like RightScale and you want to provision a server, you're getting the same view no matter what environment you're using. So that's the first part about kind of setting this up and making VMware look like a cloud to enable that hybrid. But remember at the very beginning I showed you the end user picked performance or cost optimized, right? So I do want to show you kind of how that works. Now this is going to be code, so I apologize in advance for those that aren't comfortable with that. And again, this zoomed way in. Go down, there we go. So I'll walk you through, this is just a snippet of the file that defined that application. I'll walk you through real quick the interesting part. So the first thing that we defined was a parameter. And so this is what the user saw. When the user went to launch, they saw a parameter that said, do you want cost optimized or high performance? So that's how we define that parameter. That's what the user sees. Then we have a mapping. And the mapping is where we take the value that the user selects and we map it to the correct values for the resources that we're going to launch later on. So you can see here that the cost optimized, we select a cloud and instance type, and we do the same for high performance, and they're different. And then lastly, at the bottom, we define the resource. We define the server resource in this case, and it uses that mapping, and it uses the information that the user entered to decide where to launch that server. And this block of code from line 18 to 23 is going to launch a server no matter which cloud you choose. So when you're doing a hybrid environment and you don't want to have to worry about the differences in APIs and behaviors for different clouds, using RightScale, you can define it once and use those mappings to determine what cloud to launch in. So together with all those products, with cloud management, the analytics product, and with the self-service portal that you saw from the end user, that's how RightScale helps you take advantage of hybrid cloud across public clouds, private clouds, in your virtualized environment. Rishi?
Yep, thanks Brian and Ryan. So we've walked through a quick view of the market, kind of told you what we're seeing in the hybrid cloud environment, gave you 5 of the use cases that we hear about, kind of told you the most common ones that we see implemented. We gave you a deep dive into the architecture as well, gave you a view of the product. We do have a couple of minutes now for questions. Just before I sort of transition to questions, just want to say we are at booth 609. So if we aren't able to get to all your questions here, please come down to the booth and chat with us. There's a lot more than just the 3 of us over there. So with that, we do have time for, I think, a couple of questions.
Right here near the front, Rishi.
Yeah. Oh, yep.
So how do you calculate the cost internally versus externally? One, and if you're putting instance on top of it, how do you make sure that it's a one-to-one?
Okay, so the question was, how do you calculate costs? So I guess we'll answer that offline. We'll talk. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you, guys.